You had to be very strong to make it. I don't know a lot about the journey, except that my great-grandmother, Elizabeth Housel, came by stagecoach. And she would tell my grandmother it wasn't an easy ride. And if you look at the wheels of a stagecoach, there's no rubber. It's just metal on rocks. She didn't get to ride in the stagecoach the whole time. She pushed and herded the cattle as the stagecoach was moving. She walked half the way to California.
I actually have one of the bells that was worn by the cows. I was given this and I've just treasured it just because of the sentimental value.
Now remember, no bathrooms, nothing. They would huddle in a circle and fix a fire, and that's how they lived, coming across the country. It takes great determination to do that. I would say that the determination of the family came from her side because it wasn't an easy journey. Gold had been discovered in 1848. There was great reason to come out west. This is my grandfather's side of the family, W.J. Gaudin. It was general merchandise, meaning it was the mall. It had everything. Henry Clayton Gaudin was my grandfather. That's a deer picture. Jean was 5 and I was 3. My grandmother never learned how to drive, and here was her son in the car business. Can you believe that he never gave her lessons or encouraged her to drive?
He would have if he would have thought it would have sold another car.
Well, now that's true. My dad, George Gaudin, was a very determined person.
George Gaudin built the family business on a foundation of hard work, persistence, and innovation. But the Gaudin family story is about far more than a company's success. From wagon wheels to steering wheels, the family has lived by timeless values. The principles of service to customers and community have guided generations on their journey toward an enduring legacy, one that reflects the family's heritage and inspires its dreams for the future.
Dado had a dream for the automotive industry. He wanted everybody to have a car. He was selling Model A's or Model T's, and he would actually teach people how to drive. If you didn't know how to drive, he would take you out on a dirt road and give you a driving lesson. Then, of course, people were thrilled. Some people had never even been in a car. I don't believe Dado was in the car business strictly to make money. Of course, that's part of it. You could also educate people, have jobs for other people, and help other people provide for their families.
My first dealership, I worked for George. That's how I started in the car business, was through his direction and getting me introduced to the people at Ford Motor Company. Everybody that worked for George, if they wanted to be a Ford dealer and had any ability, and George thought if they had any ability, he could get them in the right place at the right direction.
He always had a way to try and get people in. He had his pilot's license, and you could come out to the dealership there again and go for a free ride. He always participated in the parade in Salinas, and he had a car that had big horns on the front of it, and always liked to have people remember his name.
When my grandfather first started selling cars in a rural farming area in Northern California, it was miles of lettuce fields, miles of alfalfa fields, of artichoke fields, and nothing else. Television hadn't been invented yet. Radio had been invented, but it was only used by the military. It was not public yet. George Gaudin was constantly tinkering with Ford products, trying to figure out ways to modify the Ford trucks his father had. That included taking the beds and the cabs off of Model T trucks and putting them on backwards so that the truck would go through the furrows in the lettuce fields without getting stuck in the mud. That was a commercial application of front-wheel drive, and certainly one of the earliest ones we've heard of. The other farmers around the area started to realize George got his lettuce to the farmer's market much quicker, so they would offer to pay him to help modify their vehicles. This is what got the attention of Ford Motor Company. There was somebody out there making Ford vehicles perform better for their customers than Ford was. He realized the opportunity that existed there, and in those days, most of the Ford franchises were bartered or awarded in trade for services. And this is how George Gaudin, at the very young age of 21 years old, became a Ford dealer.
He really was a pioneer in so many ways. He never took no for an answer. So in all of the stories about my grandfather, he was ahead of the pack. He just was strong, very opinionated, incredibly generous and helpful, and really ahead of his time as far as the way he viewed women in the workplace, that women were completely equal, both as far as what they should be paid and their opportunities. And he really encouraged all of us to go for it, and that the sky was the limit. We could do anything we wanted to do, but it was really about the work ethic that would get us there, not being a woman, just giving it your all, and nothing can stop you.
He was an early feminist. He always told me you learn how to take care of yourself. You don't rely on some man to take care of you. And he would tell me about stories during the Depression about women coming in with their little babies and to plead that their cars didn't get repossessed. And he said, it's never going to happen to you. You learn how to take care of yourself, which is a pretty powerful message in that time period.
George Gaudin's legacy goes beyond company history. It's history in the making. The founder left a trail for present and future generations to follow.
It's no secret that there are very few women in the car business, especially ones who are successful at the jobs that they're in. Many women are intimidated by coming into the dealership. They have a misconception that they might be overcome by salesmen. So that's why it was Gary's idea to start the woman-to-woman buying experience. How it works is that if a woman would like to make a private appointment to meet with me so that they can make intelligent buying decision, when they come in, they have already a name to come and see me, and then we have a private meeting and we figure out their automotive needs together. They feel comfortable with that, and it's worked out very well.
You want your customer, the person you're talking to, whether it's a male or female, to feel like you're not taking advantage of them. You want them to feel like you're trying to help them decide whether they should get a new car or a used car, a truck or a van. And at the same time, they're not thinking that you're a shyster or you're a high-pressure salesman. I let the customer tell me what they want, and then I try to help them with their goal. Integrity maybe came along with that.
I learned so much from my grandfather about the way the patriarch of the family in those days approached his job. And that typically happened at family dinners.
Mrs. Gaudin and Mr. Gaudin were real gentlemen and ladies. We've had a lot of people in the car business that have been, I call them spooky. And they didn't fit into that category at all.
I can remember many conversations with my grandfather at his home in California when he'd talk about what was really important and what separated one family-run business from another, one Ford store from another. And he learned at a very, very young age the power of not only word of mouth and getting the story out there, but the power of a happy customer doing advertising for you and the impact it has. Really, the genesis of that was that he became a Ford dealership in a barn on a lettuce farm in Escalon, California, really in the middle of nowhere in the 1920s.
We have a couple cars that relate to where the family's begun and where they have become. So we have the tractor that's a Ford tractor to represent that the family started in farming. And farming actually ended up being a pinnacle in their life that kept them survived when the car business wasn't what it was needed to be.
The only way his word was going to get around was by the voice of his customers. So that really burned deeply into his mind. And when my father and my uncle got into the business, he really trained them hard on that so that they didn't get far removed from the customer as their focus. I remember my grandfather trying to make my dad understand how important customer satisfaction was back in the 70s when it wasn't something that was talked about, it wasn't something that was measured. He always impressed upon my dad and my uncle how important that was to have a really happy customer base because it would grow all by itself. Later, he said, "Son, if you ever get into business," and he always called me son, even though I was his grandson, "I just want you to remember that what really has worked for me and worked for your father is an attitude." The way he phrased it was, for a business, serving your communities and serving your customers has to be more than what you do. It has to be what you are. That phrase has stuck in my head all these years. Today, 95 years later, that is still the heart and soul of everything we do in every department in all of our stores. And we believe the focus that my grandfather put on the customer first, we shock the customer. But once they see that it's real and it's kind of the culture in our store, they really don't want to go anywhere else. The reason that we focus so much on the past is because we believe it's what will make us successful in the future.
The legacy that we all would like to believe we're engaged in is making a difference in the world, helping customers find joy in their car purchase. And I am honored to be a part of the legacy that we're creating right now.
The Gaudin legacy of service continues to guide the entire team across the generations. But in passing values on, a family business faces special challenges.
It's a very common problem that the business is built by the founder, and then the second generation, all too often, just walks into the business after school and starts working their way up the corporate ladder. And they often miss very important steps that they didn't make. And it's all too frequent that the family business fails at the second generation. And I think because my grandfather went through so much drama during his career as a car dealer, he went through the Great Depression, he went through 2 world wars. So when my father came along and he expressed an interest in getting into the business, my grandfather said, "I think that's a great idea, nothing would make me happier, but you can't learn the business from me. You can only learn the business properly from somebody who doesn't know who you are and just looks at you as another employee. And that's how you'll find out if you really like the car business and if the car business, more importantly, really likes you." So my dad went off and worked for a Lincoln Mercury dealer in Southern California for several years, fell in love with the business, and went back to my grandfather several years later. My grandfather was a very frugal, very recession-minded business person. So that led him to choose my dad to come move here and run the store. Arguably the most conservative, frugal man George had ever met. Fast forward another generation. I moved back from college and came back to Las Vegas and really didn't know what to do with my life. So I went into my dad's office one day and I said, I'd like to try the car business, Dad. And he said, I think that's a great idea. Where do you intend to do that? And it got really quiet in his office. And I said, what do you mean, where do I intend to do that? And then he told me the story. And it was the first time I'd ever heard it. And I was hurt first. And then he said, you know, this isn't about you, Gary. This is about the family business and making sure that you learn the business the correct way and find out if you really want to spend your life in the car business. This is 1970. There's probably 150, 200,000 people in the valley. Now there's 2 million. So all the car dealers knew each other very well. So because my dad wouldn't hire me, I couldn't get any of the other car dealers in town to talk to me. So I moved back to California, this time Southern California, and I spent a week at my grandfather's house. He kind of chuckled when I told him why I was there, and he said, well, I'm just happy to hear that your dad learned some things from me, because that's exactly what I did with him. Probably the greatest gift anybody's ever given me in the car business. Was it easy? No. I actually got fired once and had to go beg for my job back. I knew I had to call my dad and tell him I got fired. I'm now living up to his worst expectations. And I said, I'm not going to make that phone call. I'm going to go back and get my job back. And I got thrown out again. And that went on for a week. So it was a Saturday, was the 7th day in a row. And I see a smirk. And I thought, oh my God, I got him. And he sat down and he said, are you going to do this for the rest of your life? And I said, if that's what it takes. He left the office and he came back in about 20 minutes. And he said, I got good news and I got bad news. He said, the good news is we're going to give you a second chance. What I didn't tell you is you have to go work on Shay's team. And Shay was the manager in the organization that nobody wanted to work for. He was like the 800-pound gorilla of the showroom floor. Famous for his temper and a big guy. Played football for Bear Bryant at the University of Alabama. That was the only way I could keep my job, and I have to say I learned so much from Shay Schaefer. But I knew if I ever made another mistake like that, there was no coming back. Looking back on that, it's had a very profound effect on me.
He really believes that Galpin taught him everything, a lot of things he knows today, learned besides learning from George Gaudin in business. I think that working for the Galpin family, he learned a lot about people.
That probably was the pivot point where I knew how much I really enjoyed the business. The second moment in time that really stepped it up a notch is when my dad called and asked me to come home and come back to work for the family company. I couldn't wait to get home and show my dad what I could do. The next 33 years after that with my dad were a lot of fun. That was really a unique opportunity for me to bond with my dad from a business perspective. I shared the entire family history as I knew it with my kids, because I thought that was my responsibility.
For me, getting into the business, there's a tradition where we go away, and it was presented in a way that my dad kind of sat me down and was like, are you sure this is what you want to do? His exact words to me were, this is not something you can do if you don't have a love for it. And that's something I had to find on my own. It's not something he could just make me do. So this journey for me has been falling in love with the car business, which I'm hopeless now. I'm in it. I look at these cars, and when you see the love and the craftsmanship and everything that goes into them, I'm passionate about them now. And I want one very badly. I sent my dad a picture of one, and he said, how are you gonna pay for it?
What I think is really cool about Gary and the Gaudin family legacy is his daughter is now back here, and the legacy is of Gary teaching people the way the Gaudin family instilled in him and the way that he can go forward with all the employees here. It's always about a team, and you're only as good as the team that you surround yourself by.
From their first days at the dealership, team members begin to learn the Gaudin way. This can be surprising, for the company's values come into focus with one simple rule.
When I first started here at Gaudin Ford, I had a meeting with Gary Ackerman. I asked him, what's one thing you'd like to see happen here at the dealership? And I thought it'd be a real sophisticated answer with financial statements or a direction he'd like me to take the company. And he simply just said, take care of the customer, and that'll take care of everything else. And that was it. Was it any more complicated than that? I think he calls it keep the main thing the main thing.
Part of my job is delivering a best-in-class consumer experience. Gary just exudes great customer experience. And what's great about Gary is he shares his successes. A lot of dealers participate in consumer experience, but they don't want to share their successes with other dealers. Gary is a true partner and a true friend.
I was with a group for 35 years, and when I finally did make the decision to come work for Gary, that all went out the window because Gary sat me down and he made it very clear that the customer always comes first. And it was the first time I had ever heard that from a dealer principal, because the guys that I worked with and spent 90% of my career with, they were always look out for the company first. It was a real change in dynamics.
It's really about having everybody in the store working together. And what's great is he has Wesley here.
We don't look at it as a service customer or a parts customer or a body shop customer. It's a Gaudin Ford customer. And so that's really where everybody in the organization is always looking to help, not just for themselves or their department, but for everybody here at the dealership. Taking care of the customers, now that's said all the time in business, in all organizations, but until you really feel it and believe it and know it in your heart, then it's not going to come through authentically. At this dealership, you see it every single day.
When I was first interviewed, Gary and Bill Cambridge sat me down and they explained that saying of honesty, integrity, and the willingness to work hard. And they told me that if I had those three down pat, that I would never have to look for another job the rest of my career. And I believe them, because here I am. So I've worked for 5 other organizations, and they said my biggest challenge would be is to eliminate my old habits and learn the Gaudin way of doing things.
Everything Gary does within the business is ethical, and he shows that in the way we sell cars. There's no hidden things like you go to other dealerships. Same within the service and the parts department. Everything is done by the book, the way it should be done, the way George Gaudin did it, the way Mr. A did it, the way Gary does it now, and the way that the brands want you to do it.
Perfect.
Gary and his father, Don Ackerman, both honored George Gaudin's legacy of integrity. While Don Ackerman was mindful of the bottom line, he knew that treating employees well was the right direction to take on the road to success.
We've always had an emphasis upon the customer, but we learned another thing over the years, is that if we take good care of our employees, if our employees are loyal to us and happy in their work, that's reflected and brings us loyal customers, happy customers. But without the employees first, the customer loyalty and contentment with the agency does not happen.
How we relate to our employees really determines how they relate to our customers. And we have to treat them like they're part of our family.
I didn't know anything about the Gaudin family at that time when I first started, but I very, very quickly understood the fabric of the company. And I'll give you the perfect example. I was having challenges with childcare for my young son at that time, and Bill Cambridge, who didn't even know me, came and addressed it with me and made it possible for me to continue to work there without worrying about childcare.
Bill Cambridge, he's been like a father to me. I've learned more about people and how to deal with issues from him than I have from anybody else in my life. You know, he's one of those guys that when things are good, he's going to praise you. He's going to tell you things are good, but he'll also tell you when things aren't good. When you make a mistake, he always ends up by picking you up off the floor. You know, he'll let you know what you did wrong and what you need to do in the future, but he always builds you back up, and that's really important.
There is no way I would be sitting in this chair discussing my family legacy if I had not hired Bill Cambridge. I never had a brother. I hired my brother. I'd never make a business decision in my life, either pertaining to the car business or outside the car business, without consulting Bill. I never do anything in my life that's important without consulting Bill. If I had to say one thing that made a huge difference in my career, that word would be Bill.
Gary has given me a lot of credit because I implemented what we did at Ford Motor Company in terms of integrity, being ethical. Eventually, we both put in accountability. But the fact of the matter is, we wouldn't have had a dealership if Gary wouldn't have came here. He brought leasing. They didn't even know what leasing was. He brought sales processes. They didn't know what sales processes were. He held mesmerizing sales meetings. They were that good.
The funny thing about being around this family for so long is that you get to know the stories behind the stories. You get to know people's families, their joys, their trauma, their sadness, and we trust each other enough to share these things. And that's pretty special.
When the recession hit in 2008, 2009, there was a few months where they weren't able to make payroll. And Gary, being the type of person he is, just kind of made payroll out of his own account. And just because he didn't want his employees to see the impact of what the recession really has.
When things were at their worst, we had months where we shouldn't have made anything. I mean, if we put a pencil to it and bottom lined it, we probably would have owed them money that month. But that dealership never had a time come where you didn't take a check home.
I've seen employees that have gone on hard times that the company supports way above and beyond what they are required to do.
About 7 years ago, I got hit by a car in a crosswalk, and I went 56 feet in the air. It was a very, very bad accident. I broke my arm in half. I mean, I was out of work 6 months. And I got contacted almost daily by somebody here. And employees were there at my side. I mean, it was just amazing. I could hardly even talk about it.
We still are at your side, Pat.
That 6 months, I was in a 3-day coma, and when I woke up, the first thing I saw were people that were just amazing. They could have got rid of me. Said, it's 6 months, we can replace him. But they kept me on the payroll, and as soon as I got myself back together, I went right back to where I was.
I know that there's been a lot of families that's had issues, and they've helped them very, very much. Even when I lost my daughter, they were all so good to me, and I think had it not been for the people who worked here at the dealership, I don't think I could have got over it. They like to help their families when they're in trouble. So I've seen that a lot over the 30 years I've worked here.
One of my new employees, he's probably only been here about 4 or 5 months, and he comes and tells me, hey, look. I said, what? He gives me the envelope and I open it. I go, it's a birthday card. They sent it to me. Because Gaudin Ford sends the employees, everyone, birthday card, stuff like that. You know, it just makes you smile that the employees, something so small from Gaudin Ford, and it was hand signed. You know, that means a lot.
In the car business, it's such a treat to be able to have somebody that really cares about you and your family, whether it's financial support, time off, you know, wanting constant updates on people's families.
Gaudin is a multi-generational family business, not just for the founding family. Many families have worked together from one generation to the next, finding fulfillment in the values that drive the company.
We do something that you're not supposed to do. Just about any management manual you look at tells you don't bring family members into the business. We kind of have run the other way for 95 years. It's one of those byproducts of how old the company is and how long it's been around. But we have countless multi-generation employees whose parents work for my parents. So it ties the two together.
I think that Gary's legacy that he wants to pass down is the family aspect of this business. And it's not just his family, it's the families that work for Gary. We have husbands, we have wives that work in the organization. We have fathers and sons who work in the organization. And so his legacy isn't just passing down to his children, but passing down a place for these families and their children to work at. And I think that's just fundamentally different than most organizations.
Here I am, a couple of years away from retirement, and I'm working with my son, and Gary and I have been together forever, and it's just a great experience. And this is a great place to work, not just because he's my old friend and he's the boss. He's a very compassionate, very loyal, very much a caring man.
Working for my father, even indirectly, has been a challenge. My first couple of years here, I was Bill Cambridge's son. They soon found out that probably he wasn't going to listen to me, so that kind of broke down some barriers for me. I worked in every department. I've had to earn respect. I actually got suspended because I'm held as accountable as anybody else.
He deserved that suspension, regardless of who it is. Felt I had to set the example. Brad has never worked directly for me. He always had to work for another supervisor and satisfy that supervisor.
August 1st, 1997 was my first day of work. And, so the company has changed in a lot of ways in 20 years. However, there's one thing that stays the same, and that's that culture of family for those that are within this group. And so that's something that's not going to change, no matter what happens.
My dad worked for the company for 17 years. I can remember during the summer times when he worked the late shift, I would go to work with him. When I became 22, I was talking to my dad one day, said, Dad, this is a place I need to be working for. I don't want to work for any other company besides Gaudin Group and Gary and Bill. It goes back to the whole atmosphere of feeling like a family.
Sitting down and speaking with Don Ackerman, Gary's father, things were done on a handshake, and the integrity was there. I don't think a lot of people understand what that word is today, but it's something that you see in our organization. When somebody says that they're going to do something, it's delivered upon. It's not gone back on. So it's an extremely important part of our business and our culture.
When I started to work for Gaudin Motor Company, Don Ackerman office was right behind my desk. I was happy all the years I've worked here because I knew they respect the work you did. I knew that if I didn't do my job right, I would not be there that long.
I was hired by Mr. George Gaudin and went to work for him June 1st of 1959. George Gaudin was probably the greatest boss that I ever had. He would always take time to listen to you. When you did a good job, you got to go fishing on his yacht, and that was down in San Diego. One of the greatest persons that I ever met in my life. It was just a pleasure to work for him.
Kirsch's retirement party, I probably seen 50 people I hadn't seen in 10 or 15 years that used to work here. They came just to say bye to Kirsch or thank you for, helping me, pushing me along. As he would say, put a boot in your butt, get you moving. But yeah, he had a big influence on how we do our business here. I started working here when I was 18 years old. We're not just, co-workers and so forth. I practically grew up here.
When you've worked for someone like me, myself, for 23 years, Steve for 33, we're kind of like family.
I've grown up with Don and Gary both. Both of them are fine gentlemen, real loyal to both of them. They've helped me grow up with the company, my family, my kids. I'm really pleased with the company.
I started working for Gary when I was 21, 22. And Gary always took the time to come around and tell me, you need to make sure you're not a used car salesman like the ones that you see everywhere else. One of the things that he taught us is to be proud. There's a few things that I owe to Gary, and not necessarily monetarily, is the knowledge and the wisdom at the right time he gave me, because I was just growing up.
When I had met Gary originally, I really felt that he was unobtainable, unreachable. But then once I've had my first conversation with him, I realized he's actually a mentor more than he is just a leader. He wants people to learn anything and everything they possibly can be, to be 110% of themselves, never be envious, never be, I want to be like this person. That part, I think he learned from his dad along with business ethics.
I've worked here at Gaudin Ford for 21 years now. Been in the Valley for 26 years. This is basically, it feels like home. We're always growing, always learning. This area here, Gaudin Porsche, shows you that we just continue to grow.
Gaudin Motors is not just a car company, it's a caring company, fostering a passion for the work.
They told me when I first started here, the other salesmen, when I say they, that you'll never make it. They said you have too much heart, too much compassion. You got to learn you're not going to make it. And 1 year into the business, I was salesman of the month, had the best month I've ever had, and it's because of the way you're taught to treat people by working for the Acronists.
Enthusiasm to work for the company is contagious. And once people start to work for a company that cares for them, they begin to change the way they work.
You might have one of your good customers in service, and they're having a concern in service. It's nice to be able to go over to service because you know somebody over there is going to say, hey, whatever I have to do, I'll take care of them. You might have somebody who's in the body shop. There's somebody back there you've known for 20 years. You can just call and say, hey, make sure you take good care of these people. And shake their hand before they leave. And it happens. It's just amazing.
We're a family tradition. You really feel that when you work here. I know that we feel that way as a parts department. Our team but it's not just the parts department, it's the whole dealership. It's from the top down.
Generations of Gaudin teams have learned from their heritage and their intensive training. Yet the foundation of the company rests on just two simple rules.
We put our team members through extensive training. They have to remember a lot when it comes to the product. So we tried desperately to get our team members to remember two simple little fundamental things. I'm supposed to do my best, and I'm supposed to do what's right. And that will serve the mission. If a customer asks you a question and you guess wrong, you lied. There is no middle road in the automobile industry. And that's not the case, but it's the customer's perception, and perception becomes reality. So now you have a bad ad walking around town saying the wrong things about your organization. So we tried desperately to get our team members, don't guess. Just remember the two rules. Do your best, do the right thing. The right thing is to tell the truth. Mr. Customer, I don't know the answer to that question. Let me go verify what the correct answer is, and I'll get right back to you. Most customers aren't looking for something for nothing. They're looking for somebody to look them in the eye and tell them the truth.
We do things in the Ackerman fashion, which is to be straight, honest with your customers and tell them everything. Don't hide anything. Bring it all out. That's where the integrity comes into the fold.
We are a long, multi-generation family business that I'm fiercely proud of.
George Gaudin, Don Ackerman, and generations of families have seen their customers as members of a community.
As my dad grew and the community grew, he awarded the university a scholarship that had to be used by a minority child from inside the city, and he did it anonymously. I don't believe anybody in our company even knew he did this except me. So that was that little rule that he helped teach me about always doing the right thing, actually coming to life in front of my eyes. Our business grew to a point we never envisioned it.
Gary, of course, was one of the first that jumped in and said that he would refreshen his store. It was a very special grand opening. His dad was here, and he invited all the employees and a lot of customers, and on either side of the store, they have the Gaudin family story, and then they have the Ford family story, and it's really cool because the intersection at the front of the showroom is an intersection of the two families coming together. That was the last time that anybody saw his dad. It was a great moment, and it was a sad moment at the same time.
It was the best of times, but then it was the worst time. A personal shock transformed the family business.
Very young in my career, my dad had a really nasty stroke, and it took him out of the business at a very pivotal time in my career. I really wasn't ready to take over the entire business yet, but I didn't have any choice. I loved my father very much, but he was forced to let go. I'm always looking back, wondering what the world would have looked like had the good Lord not stepped in and caused that calamity in my dad's life. So I took over the business, didn't have any choice, and it was kind of a fire drill. Business wasn't good. He was in the hospital. We weren't sure if he'd ever come back, and I had to make sure the business survived. I had to change and learn more about running the business without a mentor sitting at my shoulder. I'll never forget the night when Debbie asked me, "When did you stop living for Dad?" To some extent, I don't think I ever stopped living with my dad, but at some point in time, I stopped living for my dad. I got to spend 30 plus years of my life working with my dad. I still talk to him a lot, probably always will talk to him a lot, and I don't care who listens.
Life in the family is characterized by change, but its values remain constant. The voices of Gaudin ancestors speak through the service of successive generations.
There was this passion that my dad and my grandfather both had for being involved in their community. I often tell our team members, if you're not involved in our community in trying to make Las Vegas a better place to live, you're not totally involved in the mission of our business. The lightning rod for me was one day at Gaudin Ford down on East Sahara. I met a family, and the little boy, his name was Christopher. We'll never forget the little boy's name. He had muscular dystrophy. He was in braces, could barely walk. Two young parents faced with this horrific malady to their only child, and they needed a little minivan with a wheelchair lift to get him around. And I just fell in love with this little boy. And we could hold an event. And at that time, the Jerry Lewis Telethon was headquartered at the Sahara Hotel. It started in Las Vegas, I think, in '79, but it was becoming a very big deal. It ended up being on the board of directors and got very involved in children's charities. And it just seemed natural to me. I loved kids. I loved making a difference. It just was easy.
I think that philanthropy is just as important as being successful in business. I think it's very cool to see that attached to the Ackerman name in our generation and hopefully generations to come.
I had a little boy who is one of the lights of my life. My little boy is now 32 years old. Andrew was born with high-functioning autism. As any parent can imagine, when something is different about your child and you don't know what it is and you struggle, and Vegas was still, even then, a smallish community without a pervasive infrastructure for fine medicine. We ended up having to leave town to get him diagnosed. His mother and I worked extremely hard for many years to help him overcome some challenges that most kids don't have. He has been a joy to have and now works in one of our dealerships every day and is a happy, vibrant member of the community. It became apparent to me through this unique personal experience that I couldn't sit still and watch a whole bunch of other people go through that alone. So today, we are blessed to be involved with the UNLV School of Medicine now. With our efforts, a lot of hard work and a lot of financial donation and a lot of other people's hard work, we'll open the first comprehensive team-based center for autism and neurogenetic disorders that we know of in the United States of America. It's been a long journey. It's one that just about everybody in our organization has been involved in one way or another. I'm just blessed to be surrounded by so many great team members that just rise to the occasion because they want to.
Las Vegas is always known for entertainment and sin and all bright lights and all that kind of thing. I met this very good doctor named Dr. Beasley. Last week, she said Center handles like 900 kids at the moment, and we're quickly running out of space as we speak. So it's growing almost faster than we can build.
We are going to go to work on those young people who are isolated and not being able to move forward, and this center allows us to come together to do that. Gary Ackerman said that he did not ever expect to have his name on a building, and I got in a lot of trouble for that. I kind of pushed for that to happen because he was really hesitant, and I said we needed to be very strong in who we are. We needed that. to be part of our name.
People are very lucky. And to come work for a gentleman whose passion for everybody around him in the community, and it is infectious, and it's a joy to be around. It touches something in your heart. If you've never been involved with it and you get exposed to it, it releases something in you, and to see a smile on that person's face is rewarding.
When I started with the company, I already knew Gary was passionate about autism. It's so great for the team to see him packing bags because he's not just about writing a check. With autism, he's there doing the walk and, he's on the board and, so he's doing active things to help. And even with 3 Square, him having such a passion for autism, yet still helping with 3 Square and being passionate about that was amazing.
We go to 3 Square and help with food donations. All the employees in all of our dealerships volunteer at all of these events, and it's kind of become a way of life in the business.
Because of the Gaudin team's willingness to really roll up their sleeves and pack the food, y'all are gonna have an immediate impact. On behalf of 3 Square, we're really grateful that you all are here. With your help tonight, we were able to pack 150 bags for families. We packed 3,000 pounds of produce, and we also packed enough boxes of groceries for 600 seniors this evening.
The success in the family business can really be traced back to each successive generation. George Gaudin laid the foundation. Brilliant, brilliant man that this all comes from. And then his daughter married my grandfather, Don Ackerman, and he kind of created the Vegas aspect of it and kind of laid all the roots down there. And very traditional, very brilliant man as well. Then my father came in and was able to grow in all these different advanced ways that a lot of dealerships weren't even thinking of doing yet.
Gaudin's reputation as a visionary company led to its partnership with another automotive family that has a distinguished heritage of its own.
I've been working for Porsche for 20 years now. Today, when I met the people working here, I think they are exactly along the route that I can see an ideal Porsche center behave for our brand. It's fascinating to see the parallels between our brand, which is very much based on family, on the tradition, on the story behind the scenes. Of course, also it's all about great cars, it's innovation, it's performance, but it's also about the family behind it. It's more about who you are, what you do, and being a trustable person, being active in the community. And I can see all this here with Gary Ackerman and his family, and of course all his employees that are part of that family as well.
Enjoy this auspicious occasion, drawing strength from the past as they travel the road to the future.
I have a lot of family here tonight, so it's great that 2 families that have history in the car business together can kind of join forces. We're very proud of our partnership with Porsche, and we look forward to a big future in this facility.
Since we've been married, I've watched Gary go through designing the new Porsche store, watching the whole thing be built, counting on people to put it all together, and the vision to being so excited for the opening and the Porsche president coming for groundbreaking and being there for grand opening. And he just does all aspects of it, from the old days to the new days to the future.
They're always looking forwards to what the new best thing will be, and they adapt to it and adjust to it, and that's why they're so successful. Gaudin Motor Company combines their visionary thinking with their legacy, and that's what drives them.
Let's go take a walk.
Yeah.
I'm still a child at heart when it comes to cars. I almost hate the word legacy attached to me. It would be beyond my wildest dreams for the family story to continue when I'm gone. I can't control that. All I can do is set the table and hope somebody picks up the right fork at the right time. To bring it full circle back to the genesis of our business, I remember my grandfather, he said, what really has worked for me and worked for your father is an attitude.
It's not a rule. It's not something that you can buy or write in a rule book. For a business, serving your communities and serving your customers has to be more than what you do. It has to be what you are. Really, what makes you different is the ability not only just to remember a phrase, but to wake up in the morning and feel that way. That's what makes the difference.